Today we're going to talk about M&M. No, I don't mean the rapper. No, I don't mean the candy. I know that's disappointing. No, we're going to talk about M&M, Mary and Martha. Mary and Martha of the city of Bethany, who along with their brother Lazarus were very close friends of Jesus. They deeply loved Jesus, and Jesus deeply loved them. So we're going to take a look at the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. So we're first going to go through the story, read the account, talk a little bit about it, and then after that, we're going to discuss the implications and the applications of what we've read for us today as disciples of Jesus. So let's begin in Luke chapter 10, verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Jesus and his disciples. Well, so far in the Gospel of Luke, on this journey to Jerusalem that Jesus has begun, we've read of the 12 are with him, and then he sent out 70. So when it says Jesus and his disciples, we've got at least 82. That's a sizable group. But remember, there are a whole group of pilgrims from Galilee going to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. So hard to say how many are in the group, but at least 82 disciples of Jesus along the way. So Jesus and his disciples were on their way to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover, where, of course, Jesus was going to be crucified and die. So he came to a village. Now, what village? Well, Luke doesn't tell us, but John in chapter 11 of his gospel says that Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus lived in a village by the name of Bethany. Now, Bethany was located on the southeast slope of the Mount of Olives, about 2 miles east of Jerusalem. So they came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Now, did you notice that? It was Martha's home. Now, maybe Mary lived with her, or Lazarus maybe lived with her, but we have a lady here who owns a home. Now, we may not think that's unusual today, but in that era, that was a little bit different for a woman to own a home. There's no mention of a father, no mention of a husband. And you know, when we talk about M&M, Mary and Martha, there is no mention ever of a husband. And that's a little bit unusual in the culture of the day. In that particular culture, at that particular time, young ladies were often married in their middle teens. Certainly by their late teens, they were expected to be married. And we have 2 women here, no father, no husband. She has a large house. Now, were they orphans and did she inherit the house? It's a possibility. I think more likely they were 2 widows. I could be wrong, but just thinking, I know often we think of Mary and Martha as young women. I'm suggesting they might be older than we've imagined, and they are possibly widows, and she owns a house. Now, you might remember that Mary also is the one who poured a year's worth of salary of precious nard on Jesus to anoint him. I mean, how does she afford that kind of a year's salary worth? And Martha owns a house. I'm thinking these are 2 wealthy widows. And I'm thinking they probably did a lot to support Jesus' ministry and all of his disciples with their wealth. So Martha opened her home to him. She's hospitable. Not only is she possibly wealthy, she is very hospitable and welcomes Jesus in. Now, did Jesus come alone? I have a feeling his disciples came with him. Now, in a parallel account of John, where Mary anoints Jesus, we find that at least Judas Iscariot was there. Now, I'm assuming, Martha, Mary, the brother Lazarus, and Jesus and his disciples. How many? 12? 82? What about the women who traveled with him that Luke tells us about? I think it's about chapter 8, where he had a number of widows traveling with him who actually supported him in his ministry. Now, wait a minute. How many people can fit in this house? How big is this house? I get the feeling that it's a big house and that Martha and Mary got some money. Wealthy widows, but very hospitable. So she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. Now it's interesting to note, Mary in this story doesn't say a word. She has no vocal part to play in the story. It's all Martha, 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 who does all the talking. So she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. What does that mean? It means Mary recognized Jesus as the prophet with the word of God. So she was going to listen to the prophet, the word of the prophet from God. But what does it mean to sit at someone's feet? That's an expression that means here's the rabbi, the teacher, and you are the disciple, the student. This means that for Luke expressing it this way, that Mary is in discipleship training. She is becoming a disciple of Jesus. Now, again, what's strange about that? Not in our culture, but in that culture, women didn't do that. Women did not sit at the feet of rabbis. Women did not train to be disciples. This is a culture-breaking piece of news here, that Jesus is allowing a female to sit at his feet and learn to become a better disciple. Wow. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. Notice this, Luke tells us they had to be made. This is not some delusion on the part of Martha. She's not saying, imagining this. Look, if you're going to have 12 people, if you're going to have Jesus, if you're going to have 12 more, if you're going to have 70 more, if you're going to have a group of women into your home and you're going to feed them, you got a lot of work to do. And there's no mention in this account of any servants. Just Martha. She had a lot of work on her hands, but she was willing to do it. She invited them into her home and was intent upon showing them the finest hospitality she possibly could, but that caused her to be distracted. She came to him, that is to Jesus, and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." Now think about that. Whose fault is this? Well, my sister, Mary, not helping. Jesus, you're not helping much either. You're just sitting here teaching. What's wrong with you, Jesus? Why don't you tell my sister to get in the kitchen? Whoa. Now, who does Martha think Jesus is? Well, in John 11, she says, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." Martha knows who Jesus is. But think about this. How close are you to someone when you can talk to them like that and not be afraid? She knows who Jesus is, but is she afraid of him? No, maybe she's almost too familiar with him. He's like a brother to her. And so she just says, "What's wrong with you? Why don't you tell my worthless sister Mary here to get in the kitchen where she belongs?" Verse 41, here's Jesus' response. "Martha, Martha." I think that's what he said it. He didn't just, "Martha." No, he said, "Martha, Martha." I read this as a loving reply. He didn't take offense. He didn't get angry. He loves Martha. And she loves him. And in that bond of love, they can talk to each other like this. But Jesus says, Martha, I got to tell you something. And I think he speaks in love. I think he speaks instructively. Yes, he chides her a bit, but listen to what he says to her. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried. You're anxious. You're troubled with the cares of the physical things. You're worried and upset. Now, the Greek word there translated upset is kind of interesting because it can be translated making an uproar. You're making an uproar over this. You're worried and upset about many things. Yeah, you've got a lot on your plate, as we would say. I totally understand it, but take a breath. Calm down a bit. You are upset about many things, but now here we have some manuscript problems. Some manuscripts read, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Now, if that's the translation, what it means, few things are needed, is like, we don't need all these dishes. I mean, if you brought out a pot of soup, we'd all be happy. But you're bringing out dish after dish after dish after dish. No wonder you're perturbed and upset. We don't need all this, Martha. One dish would have been fine. But other manuscripts say, but only one. There's only one thing needed. Now, if you read it that way, the interpretation changes. If only one thing's needed, what's that? To be my disciple. You hear the word be trained, be my disciple. Listen to me. Have a relationship with me. Come spend time with me. Listen to me. I want to teach you. I want you to be my disciple. That's all that's needed. That's the main thing here. So, whichever way. He goes on to say, Mary has chosen, now here's the Greek. Listen to this. Mary has chosen what is the better portion. Now, it's literally good, but in this phrase, it's a comparison. So, Mary has chosen what is the better portion. Now, you get that? He's making a little play on the food. You brought all these portions out. But guess what? Mary has chosen the better portion, the better dish, which is what? To sit at my feet and learn and be a disciple. She's chosen the best dish of all. So Mary has chosen what is the better portion. And it will not be taken away from her. I'm not going to take her discipleship away from her. I'm not going to tell her, get in the kitchen where you belong, woman. I'm not going to do that. She's my disciple. And she's hearing my word and being trained to be an even better disciple. And I am not going to take that away from her by telling her to go in the kitchen and help you, Martha. Sorry. All right, that's the story. So what do we learn from this story? Well, one might say, doesn't take a seminary education, doctoral degree, or a membership in Mensa to figure this one out. Pretty straightforward. Mary is good. She did the right thing and she listened. Martha is bad. She didn't listen. She did the wrong thing. A number of years ago, somebody said, well, I don't understand our teaching on hell anymore. Can you please explain hell to me and make it simple so I can understand it? And I said, yes, I believe I can do that. I said, first of all, here's what you need to know. Heaven, good. Hell, bad. Is that clear? So I like this. All right, Mary, Martha. Martha, bad. Mary, good. Well, as famous preacher Hayden Robinson once said, he said what Jesus was saying to Martha was, Martha, don't just do something, sit there. Don't just do something, sit there. So what do we conclude? Well, somebody said, well, isn't it obvious? We should be like Mary. That's the point of the story. We should be like Mary. We should be like Mary. Don't clean the house. Don't cook. Don't serve food to your guests. Don't work hard. Let others do the work. While you take it easy and sit and are entertained and enlightened by your guest. Now, I like that interpretation. I'm going to take that to the bank. I don't think that's right. Then what is this story all about? What is Jesus saying, and what does Luke want his audience, that includes us today, to understand? Let's remember that this story occurs in the context of what's called Luke's travel narrative. Starting what? At Luke 9, all the way to the end of the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is on his way from Galilee to Jerusalem to die. You realize how much of the Gospel of Luke, which is a lengthy gospel to begin with, but most of it is about what? This journey to Jerusalem. So, in this travel narrative, as Jesus sets his face, as Luke puts it, to go to Jerusalem, where he will face torture and death, Luke repeatedly records examples for us, for his audience of that day, and for his audience of today as well, of the necessity for, hear me, church, radical and devoted discipleship among Jesus' followers. I suggest that for Jesus and for Luke, who wants his audience to get it, the theme here of this travel narrative is radical and devoted discipleship. Let's review. Remember, Jesus, starting out on his journey through Samaria, had rebuked his disciples for showing anger rather than forgiveness for those who rejected them, instructing his disciples how to behave and how to react as they shared the gospel. He has warned 3 would-be followers, you remember them? I will follow you, follow me, but. He's warned his 3 would-be followers of the sacrifices they must make and the priorities they must have if they are going to be his disciples and follow him. Now, Jesus sent out the 70 of his disciples on a mission trip, and he warned them that they would be like lambs among wolves. Whoa. That doesn't make you want to go on mission, does it? Now, when the 70 returned, Jesus told his disciples that disciples should not rejoice about their great deeds and their great works of ministry and their fantastic spiritual gifts. They should rejoice that they're included in the life of God. Then Jesus told the story of the Samaritan, who was considered an outcast, but was willing to take risk and to sacrifice and serve in compassion-driven, hands-on, interpersonal ministry where others would not get involved. And now he tells the story of Martha and Mary to further illustrate what radical discipleship looks like. Now, Martha and Mary deeply loved Jesus, and Jesus deeply loved them. Martha shows her love for Jesus by inviting him and his disciples into her home and showing hospitality. She cleans for them. She cooks for them. She serves them. And she's going to clean up after them because she loves Jesus. She's willing to do all of that work and share her possessions, her food, her house with Jesus and his disciples because she loves him. Martha wants to honor Jesus by serving the best meal she can and by making him comfortable. She labors intensively to do this and hopes that she's pleased Jesus because she loves him. Now, Mary shows her love for Jesus by sitting at his feet, listening to his word, and learning, being and training to be a radical, dedicated, deeply devoted disciple. She wants both a personal relationship with Jesus and to hear his word, his teaching, so she can be the kind of devoted disciple she should be and please Jesus because she loves him. So who's right? Now, who's wrong? Who's good? And who's bad in this story? Well, this is not exactly a story of either or, is it? It's not either or. If you're familiar with impromptu comedy, in impromptu comedy, they always tell you it's a matter of yes and. Whatever somebody throws out, you don't say wait, you say yes and, meaning that you accept what has been said and now expand on it and go further. Follow me? Yes and. I accept what's said. Now let me expand on that and take it further. So I'm saying this is a matter like impromptu comedy. Yes and. Now, as a pastor, and I've pastored churches from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South, over 50 years. I know I look like I'm a teenager, but yeah, over 50 years. As a pastor, who do I prefer having in my congregation? Marthas or Marys? And the answer is yes and. Yes and. We really need Marthas in the church. And let me tell you, I just love Marthas. I don't know a pastor who doesn't love Marthas in his church or her church. If we got more Marthas, hey, Martha, show yourselves. Come on forward. Come on out. Let me see who you are. I want to know you. We need you, Martha. Marthas, please come forward. And, yes, and we need Marys who are willing to do some work and help out. And we need Marthas to be sure to set worship and relationship as a higher priority in their life than just work, service, or ministry, so that they don't get all bent out of shape or frustrated or in an uproar because they've had to work too much. It is a matter of priorities. But you know what? Those things that are not priorities still have to be done. Well, that's not a priority. No, but it's got to be done. Sooner or later, maybe not first, but got to get her done. You know, we can talk about discipleship and ministry as a matter of up, in, and out. You follow me? Up, in worship, fellowship, communion with the triune God. In, as a matter of fellowship, communion, loving one another, growing in our faith together, and out. Love for our neighbor, a desire to share the gospel with others. Up, in, and out. Now, in our fellowship, our denomination, we've begun to call that the hope, faith, and love avenues. Same thing, up, in, and out. Here's the thing. You can't really meaningfully and effectively go in or out until you've gone up. Now, should you only go up? No, you need to go in and out. But you can't go effectively in and out till you've gone up. So going up is the priority. But that doesn't mean you leave out the in and the out, because it's not either or. It's what? Yes and. Yes and. Now, let's take a note of caution from Martha, okay? Let's take a note of caution here. I've seen well-meaning church members seek to love their neighbors, also known as grow your church, by doing outreach ministry and having what they call outside the walls events to reach out into the neighborhood. But what I've witnessed are some well-meaning folks getting so involved in the program, the organization, the preparation, the cleaning, the cooking, the serving, that they let those activities get in the way of being with the people and of sharing God's love and building relationships. Yeah, I've seen them cook hot dogs all day and never talk to anybody. I've seen them empty the garbage cans and work and clean up the place afterwards and all that, and never share a word with anyone who came. Wait, thank you for cooking the hot dogs. Thank you very much for emptying the trash. Thank you very much for setting things up and taking things down. Thank you very much. But why did we do this? It's just a structure to build relationships and to share God's love. But can you sometimes do one without the other? Sharing God's love is a priority, but you know what? Don't leave the trash undone. It's not either or. It's yes and. I've seen sometimes folks work so hard on the outreach event that they're exhausted and cranky during it and after it. And sometimes, you know what then they do afterwards? They blame other church members. Why wasn't Bob here? Bob's always too busy. Oh, he's got all those commentaries he reads all the time. But no, he can't come out here and dump the trash. You realize only a third of our congregation participated in this. Where's the other 2/3? What's wrong with them? Why didn't they get out here and work with us and help us in this? Boy, I had to work so hard. I stood out there in the hot sun all day doing all that. And I got no appreciation for it or anything like that. And you'd think some others could come out and help once in a while. And you know what happens? Sometimes the love avenue can turn into the tired, cranky, perturbed, bad attitude boulevard. That's a caution we learned from Martha. We'd be well to take note of it. So the focus must be on God. Yes? And our neighbor. God, yes. And our neighbor. You can't focus on your neighbor till you focus on God. But when you focus on God, it should lead to loving your neighbor. Relationship. Now, relationship is built in our human frame of reference by spending time with God and others in fellowship, interaction, listening, learning, and growing together in love. It's all about relationship. Now, true, there usually needs to be a framework constructed in which this can happen because we're human and we're physical, so we kind of need a framework in which this relationship can take place and happen. But the framework ought not to be the consuming focus, taking up all of our time and all of our energy, and often leaving some hurt feelings and bad attitudes in its wake. So, the answer is that first, spend time in fellowship with the triune God. Prayer, silence, listening, meditation, Bible study, church attendance, communion, and the other spiritual disciplines that are the ways that we sit at the feet of Jesus. Hear his word and grow in being a radical, devoted disciple. Then what do? Get up on your feet. Go and serve and minister to others because that's what radical, devoted disciples do in response to having sat at Jesus' feet. It's not either or. It's yes and. So, here's the question. Should we be a radical and devoted disciple like Martha? Or should we be a radical and devoted disciple like Mary? What's the answer? Yes, and amen. Amen.